Hi, and welcome to a weekly outlook. This is Kim speaking on Monday, the 16th of October. So, looking at the euro dollar as a starter, but before I do that, I just want to run through the key news events this week, which may affect the euro dollar and the rest of the pairs. Actually, I may as well do this first. Starting this week, it starts pretty quiet until we run into Tuesday. Then we start running into some data that may affect the Australian dollar. We've got a bit of data coming out this week that could see it chopping and changing in terms of direction as we start off with a monetary policy meeting minutes at 1:30 on the 17th, so it's Tuesday morning UK time. And then we got the Reserve Bank of Australia Assistant Governor speaking following that at 1:30. So there's some early speakers. We've got the Treasury Committee, Select Committee starting this week again in London. So we'll have different speakers, and that could create volatility starting at 9:15 on Tuesday. Carney speaks at 11:15. So there's a couple of speakers at least there coming through on Tuesday, and there will be other speakers, no doubt, being questioned about the stance, etc., of the Bank of England. Following from that, then we've got inflation on Tuesday, which is CPI is due out on Tuesday, which at 9:30. Key data at the moment, it's looking like it may come in around the 3% area, which obviously, I say obviously, but creates forces to put pressure on interest rate increases. So that's a key number for Tuesday. There are quite a few other speakers on Tuesday as I'm just running through the week here, who's doing what, and there's some low level speeches, which I'll ignore, but could create volatility often late in the day in the UK session. But we've got Draghi speaking at 10 past 9 on Wednesday 18th, opening remarks to the ECB conference. That may, on Wednesday, create some volatility. And 9:30 we've got to UK average earnings, so some key data coming out there. That's always a key one, looking particularly at the average earnings. I say the average earnings, but the employment data as well, but it's the average earnings which is the key number. Dudley and Kaplan, FOMC members, speaking 1 o'clock that day, but it's really US internal data they're looking at and discussing. Moving on from that, there's little else out on the Wednesday that I'm looking at. Crude oil inventories most likely to create some volatility. Bit of volatility possibly off manufacturing sales and Canadian data at 1:30, but it's not a big mover in general. Running into Thursday, we've got some more Australian key news here. Then the employment change always creates quite a lot of volatility there at 1:30. Employment change, unemployment rate there as well. And there's the quarterly business conference confidence figures coming out all at 1:30, so quite a bit of data there, followed by the Reserve Bank of Australia Assistant Governor speaking again. So through that Asian session on Thursday, certainly some stuff to whip up the Aussie. Retail sales Thursday morning, UK, important data there. Again, that often creates quite a bit of volatility. We'll see how we work with there. And then really running through into Friday, inflation rate for Canada at 1:30 in the afternoon. Then lower and retail sales there, big pardon, and then much lower data coming from that. We got Yellen speaking on the Saturday, but I don't think any of us would be sitting around looking to try to take a trade then. So let's then look at purely the technicals. Then there are fundamentals that could be moving. Of course, there are ongoing discussions regarding Brexit, etc., which could create movement in both the euro and the pound, but they're not easy to trace and trade. Right, okay. So euro, this is a weekly picture here. It's bounced off the previous week. It bounced off the Weekly 200 there pushed up and closed up really reasonably sound last week, but there's certainly, when you start drilling down, some weakness kicking in there. From a weekly point of view, I'd look at this and maybe say it's still in a half decent uptrend, but if you draw trend lines across the lows of the move, it's certainly broken that trend line. It's whether it will pull back towards this weekly 21 at some point. It's, as I say, erring on that weaker signal. And what I've seen this morning, let's just get rid of the bottom part of the chart there. And what I'm looking at here, over the last few days, last 2 days, particularly last week, it ran into its weekly pivot and has sold off from that, and looking relatively weak at the moment. As I said, to me, I do wonder if it will carry on pushing to this downside. Lower lows rather, lower highs even, and lower lows that have been running through previously. Okay, last week we saw a bit of a rally into that for 2 or 3 days, but it seems to be giving up its gains quite quickly. So certainly some potential for that to roll off. What makes it awkward for me though is cable's almost looking the other way at the moment. It's looking erring more bullishness. On the weekly chart I'm looking at here, yes, it could. I mean, it closed in this sort of almost bullish Arami sort of candle pattern, this inside bar. There is the potential for it to come off some more with the euro selling off and the dollar's strengthening, but it does look a little bit more sound. I do wonder if it'll push up and push back towards the highs there, the previous highs coming through from a few weeks ago there last month. Whether we can get above this daily 500 may be the key point, but if we can, there's a decent potential movement beyond that level. So we'll just have to wait and watch how that works. There may be opportunities to get in before then on a more aggressive entry. It's started moving in the right direction, and when you start looking at the 4 hours, it's sort of it's putting the right sort of pattern in here, but this is far too lower time frames to drill down for a more wider outlook. It's just showing really where we are in this sort of shorter time frame, but I am looking at a potential getting bullish on the pound, but we'll just have to wait, because yes, it has also run into the monthly pivot there, and we'll just see how it rolls out as it runs through today. If it does start rolling over, well, perhaps that weekly pivot below may be a draw and target point of view, at which time I may look at that as a entry for long side, just depending on how the shape and the timing if that gets hit, but that in itself may be a sort of a target buy point for looking for a bit more upside. Dollar yen, well, let's come out bigger picture here. On the monthly, it's well, put a pivot swing in last week, a weekly pivot swing, bearish pivot swing coming through there, those 3 bars. It does look like, well, potentially it's got some more downside coming through in the shorter term frame, maybe way back towards that weekly 21. Looking at the dailies, well, that would correspond quite nicely if it carried on selling off towards the monthly pivot. So there is that potential for a bit more rollover there. So just checking there's no other weakness signs there or anything else. So there is that, as I say, that potential for it to roll back towards that at the moment, and it's erring more in that sort of direction. If you're looking for long sides on this market to play back up towards the prior highs there, well, if it gets back to the monthly pivot, or maybe even a couple of these moving averages beforehand, if they're 34 or the 50, if it suits, if it pushes up beyond that time, may give opportunities to give long bounces, so or bounce to the long side. But at the moment, it's erring to me with the picture I'm looking at here. Slightly a bit more weaker, and as I say, I prefer to be buying off the that 21 there if I was looking for the long side. Okay, Aussie dollar. Aussie dollar's put a good reversal in last week. It's closed up and it managed a bullish gain here, bullish pivot swing here, and it looks like we could see some follow through. Of course, as I've already said, there's some quite key data out this week which may help it one way or another. It's not too far off of its monthly pivot above, but weekly below. It's a sort of a rock and a hard place at the moment, which way it's going to go here initially. A move up to the monthly pivot may give a short back down. It got to me that in the previous weeks it started looking quite bearish. Last week saw it reverse this, and obviously pushing up towards that monthly pivot, which as I said, that sort of area, depending on when it gets hit and how it gets hit, may provide opportunities for reversals to continue on the bigger picture downside, but that would most likely coincide with the potential for the weekly 200, for example, another move into that. Okay, and the Canadian dollar, then just looking from a weekly perspective here. I'm erring on the bullish side of this at the moment, back to still, I say still, it had quite a good push up there. Fifth week it came down there. It has closed down lower, fractionally underneath that rising 200. It's whether or not it can pick up from where it's sort of sitting at the moment. As I said, I'm looking at this into, well, I say intermediate, but the daily point of view, it's just around about its weekly pivot there. It looks to me like there's the potential, the way it's bounced off the 21 a couple of days ago. It could be pushing back, maybe pushing towards that 100 MA, or I was looking at the weekly 21, still got the potential to be hit. There are chances that it may not get, of course, all the way up there. There is some potential resistance coming through before then from Charlie's bands, which may stifle things a little bit. We'll see. But at the moment, I'm erring more bullishness. The other thing is, I was sort of looking at the bigger term trend. I've left the exponential, the regression channel even that sits on here. And I mean, that was the sort of the trend it was in. It's certainly broken out of that and moved quite a distance away from it. So it doesn't look like it was going to be charging back towards it in any moment. Just looking at the way it's broken back above the 50, the daily 50, again, to me, it's sort of really it's erring more bullish than bearish at the moment. There are some sort of a bit of momentum coming up into the bullish side as well. So that's my favoured angle of the CAD at the moment. I tell you what, I will just throw in the euro pound. Bearing in mind we've been seeing so much noise of late. Let's just come out on the weekly here. And the euro pound, well, last week, well, it just ran back into that upper band last week. Had a good previous week there. Dailies had pushed up, ran further than I expected actually, and pushed up the previous Thursday, Friday, and then last week it's just rolled into that, run into that 50 MA, and now you can see how the pound is getting stronger, and it's showing stronger signs against the dollar. Well, it's certainly doing similar on here as well, isn't it? It's moving. As you remember, this is euro pound. Euro's weakening here against the pound, so that's just really confirming what we're seeing there against the two respective currencies against the US dollar. Right, okay, that's pretty much it for me. As I said, I've covered all the fundamentals earlier. Have a great week. Bye for now.